So welcome to our study of Jigme Lingpa's Treasury of Precious Qualities. So as always, kindly remember why we're doing this, and understanding, you could say, the radical nature of what we're undertaking in terms of addressing the cause of suffering. So this is what we call preparing with bodhicitta, particularly actually if we do this with the understanding that we wish to eliminate the suffering of sentient beings, and we also wish to enable them to awaken to their original ground, which is the primordial ground that's uncontaminated by confusion. And this essentially means establishing them in perfect enlightenment. So this is what we intend with this study. So with that motivation, we then are going to be looking at presently then the third section of the book, which really is going into a much greater dimension of, you could say, embracing the wish to not just escape suffering, not just escape samsara, but also to really serve all sentient beings. So in this chapter then, or this is the first chapter then of that section, then we are presently down to the fourth sloka. And we're looking at the value of solitude. So we looked last time at the simply just the value of having some boundaries. And of course, within a modern context, this is not so easy. But nevertheless, there are ways in which we can set some boundaries and establish parameters of peace. So that's very helpful, and that's what we're talking about here. Anyway, we begin with then supplicating the wisdom body of the great Jigme Lingpa. And we say, the source of love and compassion for all beings, who knows all that is knowable, emanation of Longchenpa, heir to a treasury of mind termas, sky-like yogin of the vast expanse of luminosity, and Jigme Lingpa, at your feet we pray. So then in terms of the text itself, then we're looking at Kangyur Rinpoche's commentary. Actually, just to sum up, this chapter is presenting what we call the four wheels. And I'm just going to go back to reiterate what these four wheels are. So these are, actually, I'm just going to go to the root text, because that's where we talk about these four. To live in favorable, conducive places, to follow holy beings and imbibe their qualities, to have good aspiration, and desire to be protected by one's merit. So we're talking about favorable, conducive places. Of course, in traditional, not just traditional, but you could say in Buddhist, in cultures that recognize the value of Dharma and recognize the centrality of working with consciousness and being able to set the right, you could say, parameters for working with this consciousness, then solitude is very helpful. This is universal, not just in the Buddhist tradition. So you could say in most other cultures, there is an understanding of the value of solitude. And as such, you could say it's part of the culture. In our culture, in the modern culture, there's very little of that. But at the same time, it's not an impossible task to find ways in which we could set boundaries and create conditions that are conducive. So that's what we're looking at presently. And so then in the commentary, then we are, let's see here, we're looking at stanza 4, where Kangyur Rinpoche says, or rather Jigme Lingpa says here, cats are hard and cruel in mind, and yet so sweetly and so peacefully they move and sit. Bad friends are just the same, and with their easy company, they'll quickly turn you from the Dharma. So please, all cat lovers, there are definitely cats, which I have known cats who were vegetarian, who did not kill. So not all cats are hard and cruel, certainly at least not in their behavior. And also similarly, not all friends are bad. But of course, we can see there's a pattern. And I certainly have also lived with cats that came home with some what we used to call offerings, which reflected a pretty hardcore lifestyle in terms of killing. So this is what Jigme Lingpa is referring to. So that's where he then Kangyur Rinpoche comments on this. And unfortunately, this is not uncommon among cats. So we're going to have to acknowledge that there is something in the cat disposition that, which is what we're talking about here, and that is, consider then, says Kangyur Rinpoche, the nature of a cat. The cat's mind is intractable and cruel, and it gives itself to acts of wickedness such as killing. Yet outwardly, it appears to be the most peaceful and good-natured of creatures. Whether it moves or sits still, you hardly notice it. Its voice is so soft, and you would never think that it had claws. But let it see a bird or mouse, and the cat will leap on it with all its might. Therefore, have a care for the company you keep. Bad friends at first, like the cat, seem pleasant companions, so considerate and generous. And notice we're saying bad friends. Okay, it's not all friends, but there are friends which might not be that helpful. However, you could say pleasant they might appear to begin with. Kangyur Rinpoche says, but in the long run, these bad friends bring ruin to beginners in the practice who naively consort with them and whose compassion is fragile. The pleasant, amusing society of such friends will quickly draw you away from the sacred Dharma. So these are just considerations that we need to ponder. Jigme Lingpa says, constantly in motion, sun and moon are dear to all, while long familiar company breeds spite and irritation. Places newly visited are free from trouble, where everyone you see as a friend. Let's see this, yeah. So the commentary is, Dharma practitioners should nevertheless be on friendly, easygoing terms with everyone, just like the sun and moon, which, thanks to their steady and continuous motion, are appreciated by everyone the world over. Quarrels over wealth and so forth come from staying constantly in one place. On the other hand, if you move on, as soon as you get to know people and are on familiar terms with them, you will find that wherever you go, there will be no reason for disputes and everyone will consider you a friend. So that's where we can see sometimes when we have been in places for a very long time, the novelty wears off and we are sort of more prone to perpetuate negative habits and so on. Whereas if we're not too involved and too attached and we can move on easily, then we will have less reason for disputes. 6 and 7. But those who, though they speak like common folk, have minds that do not follow after good or evil speech, regarding it as no more than an echo, have no restrictions for their dwelling place. Those whose training in pure discipline and whose single-pointed concentration are as yet unstable will reap attainments, great or small, according to their dwelling and the company they keep. So this is again where instead of looking at the environs, the circumstances, we're then looking at the mind. And like we say, those who then have discipline, they also will be able to get along wherever they go. Kangyur Rinpoche says, it may appear that spiritual masters sometimes speak angrily or with words of attachment, and sometimes they seem to enjoy gossiping like ordinary folk who are driven here and there by their uncontrolled thoughts. But for such masters who have perfect control of their mind, good and bad circumstances have but a single taste. So that's where we indeed can look at masters, and we're talking about genuine masters, not masters who have a career masters. We're not talking about that. We're talking about genuine persons who have genuine spiritual qualities. They have eliminated their own confusion, their own kleshas. They are, you could say, they have unveiled a natural cache of kindness and compassion, strength and wisdom. Now, such masters, they interact not on the basis of their need for interaction or company, but on the basis of compassion. And that's why they will engage in however ways necessary. They might sometimes, to close students, be tough, or they might with others be seductive, or they might just look like they're just engaging like any ordinary persons. But the thing is, their minds are completely untouched by the circumstances. For them, everything is, you could say, something they just embrace with equanimity. So that's why we say a single taste. And regardless of what these masters say, sharp or sweet, they remain free from craving and resentment. Their minds are not entangled in their words, which resound simply like an echo. When we say resounding simply like an echo, they're just responses. They're enlightened responses to the particular circumstances. They are, Kangyur Rinpoche says, beyond all sense of indulgence and rejection. They're not drawn to certain things or repulsed by other things. They strive impartially for the welfare of all beings. To such masters as these, what was said about the proper place to live does not apply. They can live anywhere. By contrast, if you wish to embrace the utterly pure discipline that leads to perfection of nirvana and to set yourself single-mindedly in authentic samadhi, and if your practice of the three trainings is not yet stable, you should take great care. So that's why, even though we're on the path, if we haven't achieved this kind of stability, we should be careful. Kangyur Rinpoche says, if you're able to remain in solitude and with good companions, your practice of the three trainings, meaning discipline, meditation, and wisdom, will bear rich fruit. It will not amount to much if you stay in a crowd and keep bad company. So this is the first then, in terms of finding a place, then solitude. Let me just check on that. I think this is still within the first. Sorry, this is still part of solitude. Sorry, this is still part of solitude. That's right. Anyway, so then here, livelihood. So this is still in terms of, you could say, our circumstances. Jigme Lingpa writes, since our teacher, meaning the Buddha, since our teacher has permitted it, and since it brings forth merit in the other's mind and leads to no impairment of the discipline, the beggar's way is like a wish-fulfilling jewel. To live from alms alone is consonant with Dharma. So this is where we look at how the communities, and in the general, you could say, in the sort of very visible context of Buddhist cultures, you see the monks that live from alms, but also in cultures where there are practitioners who are entirely dedicated to the path. Even the lay people also could live from receiving alms, such as, for example, tantric yogis and so forth. The thing is that what we would say is this such practice in Tibetan is called Sönyom, meaning Sönam Nyompa, which means to equalize the merit. The merit is shared. You're engaging in something profoundly valuable, and when others have an opportunity to be part of it through giving you sustenance for your life, then they also are sharing in that merit. So Kangyur Rinpoche here writes, to humble his disciples' pride in social rank, physical appearance, and wealth, our teacher, Lord Buddha, authorized the begging for alms. If the giving of alms is performed with the three purities of preparation, main part, and conclusion, let's just look at what that is. So if the alms is performed with these three aspects, which are, of the three purities, the first is the fact that the alms gift does not derive from wrong livelihood. So we're not receiving, we're not receiving alms from somebody who's stolen, or you could say somehow been involved in negative actions. So the alms gift does not derive from wrong livelihood. The second is that the act of giving itself should be done openly, without wrong intention. So it's not as if somebody would give us, alms, and then they would do so on the basis of wanting something. There's no strings attached. It's simply just giving. And the third is that the donor is happy with the act and without regret. So it's not like the owner feels obliged. Everybody else in the neighborhood is giving alms to this mendicant, and so feeling obliged to it, but really sort of very worried about, giving out whatever it might be, So that's where the last one is that there has to be a genuine spirit of giving. So with these three aspects in place, it generates merit for the benefactor. In addition, it reduces the worldly involvement of the Dharma practitioners, for they have all that is necessary to feed and clothe themselves without having to curry favor or engage in commerce or agriculture. So that's where the practitioner, all they would care for is just to have enough food, just enough clothes, and they don't need more. And then living in that way, they can avoid engaging in, you could say, distracting activities. So this is particular then to the, you could say, the monastic approach. As a result, their practice of the three trainings, again, discipline, samadhi, and wisdom, will not decline. Begging in such a way as this, in circumstances where there is merit for both the practitioner and the benefactor, is in harmony with the Dharma and is like a wish-granting jewel. The practitioner flourishes, the benefactor flourishes. Stanza 9. Let's see here. Theft by devious means and making gain by giving gifts, to wheedle with cajoling flattery, to show a false facade, to flaunt one's rank. These 5 are impure ways of livelihood, a shame for those engaged upon the path. So this is where the monastic lifestyle could be corrupt. Of the many impure ways of finding sustenance mentioned in the teaching, there are 5 that are extremely improper. Okay, this is not just the monastics, by the way. This is just overall in terms of livelihood. First, there is a kind of indirect stealing which consists of pretending that you are poor, while in fact concealing your possessions. Second, there is trying to get someone to give you something by pointedly praising the past generosity of others, or else by giving small tokens in the hope of some large recompense. Third is to cajole people into giving you things either by flattery or by suggesting in a roundabout way that you are a good person. Fourth is to pretend to be a great Dharma practitioner when in reality you are a woeful disgrace. Finally, there is the attempt to secure ample provisions by parading your rank and pedigree. These are 5 incorrect ways of securing a livelihood. For anyone wishing to progress toward liberation, they are highly discreditable. With regards to diet, the Lankavatara Sutra says, killing animals for profit's sake and giving money for the meat thereof are evil acts that lead to being boiled in lamentation or the other hells. So we've looked at the hells both in our study of the finding rest in the nature of mind and also here. And these are experiences that are based on essentially causing trouble to others. We are you could say, in conflict. We're at odds with others. And this certainly is accentuated in the context of actually killing others. These others might be animals, but they also have an experience and will undergo tremendous suffering. So that's where we talk about the sort of the generosity that consists of giving money from the meat from such killing is not virtue. And also, it says, there is no meat that's pure in these 3 ways, and so I will refrain from eating flesh. This is a summary translation of the quotation. The sense of the Tibetan terms mata, malang, makul is difficult to interpret. For meat to be considered pure, three criteria are necessary. One, the consumers must have seen that the animal in question was not killed specially for them. Two, they must have heard it from trustworthy source that the animal was not slaughtered for food for their specific consumption. And three, they must have no doubt that this is so. Subject to these conditions, one is allowed to eat meat. So that's why if we're sure that this was not killed for us, that the animal was not slaughtered for our particular consumption, and there must be no doubt about this. It's not just hearsay. Then, in that case, then one can be allowed to eat meat. Another more stringent oral tradition stipulates the following criteria. The consumer must see that the animal has died a natural death, have it on trustworthy report that this is the place, have no suspicion that the animal was intentionally slaughtered. So this is this naturally, if have no suspicion that the animal was intentionally slaughtered, that obviously would then also mean the animals that we find in butcher shops and so on, which have all been killed expressly for that purpose. Whereas if you happen to find an animal that's dead in nature who died a natural death, then in that case, yes, then you can eat that. So this is the provisions that are stipulated within then the sutras. And then it said, for this reason it said that one should refrain from eating meat. If you do eat it, you should feel responsible for the dead animal and with compassion recite dharanis, mantras, and prayers of dedication for it. So we find also many Tibetans would eat meat, but then again, there is a practice then to say mantras for the deceased animal and to make connection with the animal and so forth. So they're not consumed frivolously. And that said, I always remember my teacher, Tukapema Wangyal. He says it's very good to say prayers for the animals that you're eating, but you could say prayers for them without eating them. So in the case also of the author of this text, Kangyur Rinpoche, he was a vegetarian, and in his family it was very common to be completely vegetarian. So Jigme Lingpa writes, and so a perfect dwelling and good livelihood, good company and application all arouse one's strength of mind. In order to acquire the qualities of threefold training, have recourse to holy beings. So this is now when we are. So then it says, thus you should keep to a solitary place and an excellent seat of grass. Let's see what that means. The Buddha sat on grass when he attained enlightenment. Let's see here. According to the tradition, going back to the Buddha himself, the seat of a forest hermit is made of kusha grass. So this is sort of more, you could say, figuratively in terms of the hermit's seat. I have yet to see a hermit that was actually sitting on grass. But what actually you do in the tradition is you would take kusha grass and you would place it under as a double, as sort of a crossover. You would sometimes put that crossing over under your seat. Yeah. Basically to create, you could say, the auspicious conditions to follow the example of the Buddha. So anyway, keeping thus to a solitary place, this particular seat, then relying on alms, the best of livelihoods. You should associate with virtuous friends whose conduct is wholesome. If you endeavor in this way with faith and respect and diligently train yourself in the techniques of shamatha and vipassana, your wisdom will gradually become sharper and your determination to persevere in the practice will be roused. So these are very good conditions in terms of establishing, you could say, very helpful parameters, and then having the ideal conditions for persevering in practice. Okay. Reliance on a spiritual master. So this is then the second of the four wheels. So Jigme Lingpa, he says, what? Like a log of common timber lying in Malaya's forest groves, absorbs the fragrance of the moistened sandal leaves, you will take after those whom you frequent. So the Malaya, apparently, I'm not sure, I think it's maybe somewhere in India, but these are sandalwood forests. So that's where even ordinary wood in these places begin to take on the scent of the sandalwood. So similarly, also through associating with noble persons, then we would also take on their scent, so to speak. Kangyur Rinpoche comments, to cultivate the qualities of the three trainings not yet possessed, and to perfect the qualities already gained, it is essential to rely on a fully qualified spiritual master, expert in the key points of the three trainings. It is said that when a log of ordinary wood lies in the forests of Malaya, that great garden of medicinal plants, it will be impregnated with the moisture dripping from the leaves of the sandalwood trees and will gradually imbibe the sweet perfume of sandal. In just the same way, if you are able to frequent a spiritual master, you will quickly acquire the latter's qualities. So that's where, of course, we talk about a living tradition in which the culture set by the example of the teacher is very, very conducive to the path. And that again is where we wish to associate as much as possible with sublime beings, and certainly keeping the example of sublime beings in mind. You could say their character begins to be absorbed within our character. Now, fully qualified masters. Yes, there are masters and then there are masters. See here, that's 12 and 13. A master who has all the qualities of sacred Dharma in this age of dregs is hard to find. One whose mind is like a soil well tilled through the injunctions and restraints of the three vows and watered with both learning and with great compassion. These are the kinds we would look to. Rely on such a one, a master of the myriad practices of both the Tripitaka and the secret mantra. Master rich in fruits of pure primordial wisdom, both of realization and elimination, who with sumptuous flowers of four attractive qualities gathers to him or herself the lucky bees, his fortunate disciples. So, so Kangyur Rinpoche comments, in times gone by, in the period of the teaching's immediate result, let's see what that means. The historical duration of the Buddha's teaching is said to consist of four major periods. First, there is the period of fruit, immediately following the promulgation of the doctrine of the Buddha, when people who practiced it attained realization with great speed. There then followed the period of practice, when people have to practice in order to gain the result. In the third period of transmission, the Dharma is merely transmitted. At that time, only a few people practice it, and those who gain the result are extremely rare. Finally, in the residual fourth period of science, the Dharma is maintained only in its external science. So we then talk about the first period, and that's where then people would have very quick results. Disciples with pure minds then had no trouble in meeting great spiritual masters and siddhas who exhibited all the signs of authenticity as described in the sutras and the tantras. But in the present age of decadence, it is extremely difficult to come across such masters. Nevertheless, it is essential to rely on spiritual friends whose minds are like excellent earth, well tilled both by the knowledge of the precepts and of the three vows, as explained in the text, and by faultless conduct, unstained by negative emotion. See what that refers to. This is a free translation of the Tibetan term Kangyur Rinpoche. For a full explanation of this, see chapter 9. The three vows are the same both in purpose and in the antidote. Good. So usually gak means to stop something and good means necessity. But anyway, we'll see that in chapter 9. We'll get back to that. Anyway, the point is that these individuals, they are examples. The earth of their minds should be moist with the knowledge of both the words and meaning of the sacred texts and their commentaries, themselves the source of their own freedom. And it should be saturated with great compassion and a loving concern for all that lives. It should yield too a harvest that is rich in a proficiency in the vast array of ceremonies and rituals of the Tripitaka and the 4 classes of Tantra, in a practice that is not merely verbal, but penetrates to the essence, and in the overflowing stock of stainless wisdom resulting from the elimination of the twofold veil and the realization of all the qualities of liberation. It is thus that brilliant flowers will blossom, the 4 ways in which the masters attract disciples who are fortunate in treading the path of liberation. The latter are like bees that come and savor the quintessential nectar of instructions. The 4 ways are: 1, a generosity that is completely free from attachment. 2, a way of teaching that is attuned to the disciple's mind. 3, the ability to introduce them to the practice that leads to freedom. And 4, the fact that the teacher practices what he or she preaches. So these 4, actually the last 4, we very often see referred to duo ngopo shi. So these are how teachers would really attract students. They would be attractive in terms of their generosity, and they would teach so the students get what is being talked about. They would enable the students to apply this in terms of an actual application, a path. And the teacher, they themselves would be, you say, consistent in their behavior, consistent with in regards to what they're teaching. The Buddha said in the Mahabodhi Sutra, Ananda, do not sorrow. Ananda, do not weep. In the future, I will come again, appearing as your spiritual friend, to act for your and others' sake. We should therefore understand that a true teacher is the Buddha come again. So Jigme Lingpa then says, especially a master who expounds essential teachings must have been empowered, must rest serene in pure samaya, absorbing all the meanings of the Tantra of ground, path, and fruit. The marks both of approach and accomplishment they must have complete, their mind set free through realization. Their compassion must be boundless, others' good must be their only care. Earnestly caught up in Dharma, they should have but few activities. Towards samsara, they must feel great weariness, inspiring this in others. They must be skilled in means and have the blessings of the lineage. Rely on such a master, and attainments will be swift. So in the modern culture, we, of course, speak about gurus almost like a dirty word. There's the sort of the notion that relying on someone to guide us in spiritual matters is highly suspicious. It's difficult in our culture because, first of all, there's not really a clear understanding of what really spirituality involves. And also, the majority of persons in our culture don't really have, you could say, the qualities of enlightenment. They're not really being a tradition or a path, and so not a vision of enlightenment. So that's where in our culture it's very difficult, the issue around teachers. But here, and this is what's particular then to traditional Buddhist cultures, in which there is a very clear idea of what a teacher necessarily needs to be. the qualities they need to have, what are the signs to look for. And as such, we could say that the traditional societies are very critical about teachers. They have very clear, you could say, quality control. So Kangyur Rinpoche comments, Vimalamitra has said that authentic teachers who expound the special pith instructions of the diamond vehicle of the secret mantra, and who thus set forth the absolute truth, must possess the following 8 characteristics. So Vimalamitra, as some of you will know, was one of the masters who brought the Buddhist teaching to Tibet. Particularly, he's famous for his teaching the Great Perfection, but he also assisted with a lot of the translation works and had a lot of impact on the early, rather on the translation process of bringing Buddhism to Tibet. So, in addition to teaching the Great Perfection, which he really only did to very few persons, he actually taught quite a bit on what we would call the causal vehicle of characteristics. So anyway, with regards to how we should identify someone who is an authentic teacher, he says they themselves must have received the empowerment related to all the mandalas of the outer and inner tantras, and their minds must be filled with wisdom. 2. Their body, speech, and mind must be serene and disciplined through their observance of the vows and samayas. 3. They must have perfectly understood and assimilated the meaning of the general and specific Tantra texts. In other words, they must have integrated the ground Tantra, which is the nature of the Sugata Garbha, the path Tantra, namely the stages of generation and perfection that nurtures the quality of elimination and realization, and finally, the fruit Tantra, the naturally present kayas and wisdoms of Buddhahood. So, in fact, they must have, first of all, understood the view that comes from the Tantras, and they must have completely integrated the path in terms of understanding what we call ground, path, and fruition Tantra. 4, they must have a complete experience of all the signs of proficiency in the phases of approach, accomplishment, and activation. So these are specific, you say, actions that are implicit in the practice of sadhana. See what they say here. Approach, accomplishment, and activation are different phases of the sadhana practice. So they must have an unconfined view, having realized the equality of samsara and nirvana. So that's where they must have a vast view and a vast realization. And 6, having direct experience of this, their minds must be liberated. They must be completely free. They wouldn't have an agenda. They would not have likes and dislikes. Their minds would in no way be encumbered by ordinary confusion, kleshas, and habitual patterns. 7, with boundless compassion, they must be guiding beings to liberation. And 8, their activities must be exclusively for the sake of others. So that's where teachers, we might ask teachers, what would you like for dinner? And they would say, oh, I'd very much like, salad or, I don't know, whatever, pizza, what have you. But this doesn't indicate that they have some particular wishes one way or another. This will just be to interact with others. And so accordingly, they will, of course, express sort of, oh, yeah, I love this. Would you like to go and see, the Eiffel Tower or the Opera House? Yes. Oh, I would love that. And then they might lead us to think, oh, these persons, they really love the Eiffel Tower. They really love the Opera House or whatever. But of course, this is more just to connect with beings. So that's why all these actions that appear as ordinary in no way are really ordinary, and really particularly what plays in is this compassionate wish to engage with others. So we could say any action, even the sort of expression, oh yeah, I'd love to see the Opera House, really just comes from a place of compassion. It's not as if they have been sort of sitting waiting for all my life, I've wanted to see the Eiffel Tower. Anyway, in addition to these, the omniscient master Jigme Lingpa has added 2 other characteristics. This true spiritual masters have few activities. They are exclusively preoccupied with the Dharma, fully committed to it in thought, word, and deed. They have a great weariness of samsara and a powerful determination to depart from it. Their presence has a transforming effect on the perceptions of all who meet them, so that the latter are inspired to seek for liberation. So again, that's where we would see great teachers have no interest in anything except just essentially benefiting others, and benefiting others through the Dharma. There's nothing beyond that. 2. A spiritual master knows many skillful ways of leading others out of samsara and possesses the blessing of an unadulterated lineage that is untainted by breaches of samaya. By following such a master, it is possible to attain the supreme and ordinary accomplishments swiftly and in this very life. So that's where a great spiritual master would be very skillful in knowing how to benefit others. And whatever they're doing, let's say, for example, in the modern context, you would have great masters that all of a sudden, like Chögyam Trungpa, would insist that his students, they get a job, that they work, have families, dress properly, and essentially, you could say, create an uplifted, you could say, character and spirit within their lives. And we might say, gosh, you know, is this the Buddhist teaching? Well, these are what we call skillful means and understanding what is needed for these particular people. So such a master doesn't just sort of come out of the blue and invent something, but they do so on the basis of essentially being the manifestation and the compassionate, you could say, embodiment of the wisdom of the lineage. And as such, these persons, they enable others to really enter the path fully, and then they lead them to the skillful means that bring about the what we call supreme and ordinary accomplishments. Now, I think that's all actually I have in the root text. I normally sort of cut and paste a bit, otherwise the root text is sitting way back, and then we have to go back and forth. So that's why I sort of have that sitting in a different document. So I think we might just call it a day here. If you have any questions, please go ahead. I know we are ending a little bit early. Hope that's all right. While you're having, some of you might be writing down questions. I'm just going to go over the supplication we have to Jigme Lingpa. It's very beautiful. The source of love and compassion for all beings, who knows all that is knowable. Shija Kunsik Ndrola Jetsete. Shija Kunsik Ndrola. This really refers to the two wisdoms of a Buddha. One is knowing, the knowing, and also the compassion. And then we say emanation of Longchenpa. We actually, yeah, emanation of Longchenpa. So we really just say this is a re-embodiment of Longchenpa, and we would say heir to a treasury of mind treasures. And we would say, yes, he is heir to a treasury of mind tamas, in which we would say that the Longchen Yingtik that was Jigme Lingpa's treasure cycle, we would sometimes refer to it as really the heart essence of Longchenpa. So that's where all the teachings that came down to Longchenpa, and where Longchenpa gathered all the different transmissions of the great perfection from Vimalamitra and Padmasambhava. Then again, there was all these, the pith of all of this was came out manifested as a mind treasure of Jigme Lingpa. So as such, then this great yogin and Jigme Lingpa himself really, of course, embodied all the qualities that we were just talking about. was someone we would call a sky-like yogin, somebody who abides in the ultimate realization, the vast expanse of luminosity. We supplicate you. So yes, if we're eating meat, then Shinrezi mantra for animals is okay. Yes, absolutely. Yeah, Om Mani Padme Hum. If also if we see dead animals, or in any occasion really where we're communicating with others, I remember once driving Kangyur Rinpoche's two sons to the airport, as well as also Jigme Rinpoche's wife, Ingrid. And all of them, as soon as we would pass by paddocks with cows, they would all be yelling out of the window, Om Mani Padme Hum, as we were driving by. Then when would it be appropriate to seek advice from a teacher on what to do with one's life? For example, like Chögyam Trungpa telling his hippie followers to get jobs. Yeah, the question is, do you really want to ask that? You might end up being told to do something that might break your habits, which is the hippie students of Trungpa Rinpoche, they were told, right? I don't know if any of you have seen this documentary on Trungpa Rinpoche, which is called Crazy Wisdom. It's really worth watching. But in there, it talks about how Trungpa Rinpoche was a wild teacher. And people they were just okay with that. But when he told them to dress properly and get jobs, before the 16th Karmapa came to visit, then Trungpa Rinpoche asked his students to please clean up, tidy up a bit, and dress well. He said the narrator says in this movie, that's when like so many of the students left. Like they were fine with a wild, outrageous teacher, but to have somebody who asked them to dress properly, no way, they wouldn't do that. Well, some of them at least. The rest of them actually, in the 70s, you could say where the general Tibetan Buddhist followers, they generally often looked rather, you could say, lived somewhat marginally, very much a part of counterculture. Then Chögyam Trungpa's students, they actually were early on told to integrate, not reject their culture, but integrate. So here then there's a comment, I think animals even die to keep vegetables safe. So it would still be appropriate while eating a vegetarian diet. Let me read that again. Animals even die to keep vegetables safe, like they're protecting the vegetables. So it would be appropriate while eating a vegetarian diet. I'm trying to get my head around that one. It's a good thing we're not in a hurry. Nobody else has written any questions. So I'm sitting here pondering the meaning of this. And let me see here. Yeah. I think they mean like pesticides. Oh, right, to say mantras over the vegetables. Yes, that's right. Okay, thank you. Thank you for getting it. I'm a bit slow here. But you're right. That is what it's about. It's about the pesticide. So yes, we definitely realize, yes, that's implicit also, that there's not any food really that comes without some karmic debt. That's right. Yeah. But there is a big difference between, you could say, eating animals and eating vegetables. Somehow in our minds, there is a different, you could say, spirit. If it's hard, someone says, if it's hard to give up eating meat, could it be helpful to take a vow to only eat it in situations when it's offered to us? Well, to answer that question, yes. And there are also times when persons would take vows to not eat meat on particular days. For example, not during the full moon, not during the new moon, not during particular days and so forth. Or to even, yes, take a vow to just eat meat when it's given to you. Yeah. And also before eating it, we make a prayer that through our eating their flesh, since we have taken the bodhicitta and refuge vows, they may be connected to the Dharma right in the next life. That's right. That's the kind of prayer we would do. Maybe it helps, or I'm kidding myself. No, that's a very good thought. That's any thought. Of course, we might think, oh, I'm not a bodhisattva, but we're not kidding ourselves. We're, yes, we might not be bodhisattvas, but even just sowing a little seed, might have a big impact. Okay. All right. So if there are no further questions, then we'll just call it a day and end at this point. So thank you very much for joining me here in this study. Through all our births, wherever we may be born, may we be endowed with the 7 good qualities of the higher realms. As soon as we're born, may we meet with the Dharma and have the freedom to practice it properly. At that time, may we please the holy gurus and practice the Dharma throughout the day and night. Realizing the Dharma and accomplishing its essential meaning, may we cross the ocean of existence in that life. Thoroughly teaching the holy Dharma in this world, may we never tire of accomplishing the benefit of others. By this vast benefit of others, without partiality or bias, may all attain Buddhahood together. So, thank you very much.